now. I'll tell you what happened then, but I'll just contextualize this. I have been raising money nonstop since that very first raise. Even after selling ZICO, starting funds, I've raised $1 billion, including our own funds, and it never gets easy. Never. It's easier, or I realize what happens, but the same process I used then, I use now, and I use always. I made a lot of mistakes, a lot. I lost a ton of money, millions myself, millions. And I also brought a lot of people into investments that followed me, trusted me, and lost millions. Mm-hmm. That is humbling. And through that process, as well as a lot of other things fell apart in my life. My health started to go to hell. My marriage fell apart. I sort of woke up one day and thought, this is not what success was supposed to look like. And I don't feel free. I don't feel free. I'm stuck on phone calls and emails, and I'm angry and upset and So I'm running, like racing to the next goal and another fund and another deal and another exit, another million and another. And so I finally started to just take a step back and say, okay, I gotta rethink everything.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now, and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Mark Rampolla, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about this amazing book that you wrote that so entrepreneurs can gain freedom. I love this. This is really, really cool. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Look, I'm a big fan of your show and really have enjoyed the guests you've had on. So I'm honored to be here. So I really appreciate it.
Buddy. Thank you. We're honored to have you. So where were you born?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Ooh, Steel Town, baby.
Steel Town, hardcore Steelers fan when I was a kid. And it was a great place to grow up. You know, my family was not wealthy, but not poor, but it didn't matter. Nobody had money anywhere around us. And there wasn't an entrepreneur in my family or neighborhood. And the most successful business person I remember was a salesperson for Maxwell House Coffee in southwestern Pennsylvania. That was it. But it was a great place to grow up. I loved it.
That's cool. So what was your favorite thing about growing up in Pittsburgh?
Oh, man. I grew up in a neighborhood of Baldwin in the South Hills. And maybe it's because I was the youngest of 6 that my parents got to a place where it's like, it didn't matter what I did as long as I was home, you know, at dinner and could hear my mom's big dinner bell from a mile away. I would spend my days, weekends, after school out.
Yeah.
Just out in the woods, on a bike, playing basketball, running around with friends. Just that level of freedom was just extraordinary. And I loved it.
That's so cool. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Oh, great question, Mike. Oh, boy. I don't know. I've thought about that for a while. Believe it or not, physics. My dad was a physicist. I did not get that gene, but I did just love. I had a great professor and a teacher, and he just made it really fun and interesting. And also, I was good enough to be able to tutor other kids. Sometimes they got better grades than I did because I can see now I had ADHD, but I got it and I loved it, and that's the one. Yeah,
that's cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Oh, boy. probably my father, and in a beautiful way, I can see now, again, given I was number six, he was quite a bit older, but he was still active and engaged. But I tremendously admired him, and I came to see later in life that there was a little bit of like God and my dad,
Mhm.
right? And there was this huge gap down to me, right?
Mhm.
But I really admired him. He passed away a few years ago, but he was a wonderful man.
So in high school, did you have a favorite teacher? Was it that physics teacher?
Yeah, yeah, it would be. It would be.
What
Oh,
was it about that teacher that made them your favorite?
oh boy. He 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 was a big guy, he was very engaging, and he would pause. He would ask questions. He asked a lot of questions, and he would pause. And then he was great in a group dynamic of a bunch of rowdy kids, getting us our attention. So I remember he would have these like rubber balls that he would throw against the wall to demonstrate certain physics concepts, but then
Mhm.
he might just wail it at somebody to get their attention. But he was serious, but in a fun way.
Yeah.
And it just made it easy to engage.
Isn't it amazing how teachers can just reach you, you know?
Oh, it is. It's a powerful gift. Powerful gift. I appreciate you helping me remember that, Mike. That's great.
So after high school, where'd you go and why?
I went to Marquette University in Wisconsin, and I think I wanted to get out of Pittsburgh. I loved it, but I wanted to get out. And
Did it work, the Wisconsin thing?
yeah, yeah, it was far. That's about as far as my mind could conceptualize
Yeah.
that. Something like California or Texas. It's just like it was a foreign.
Bridge too far? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a Jesuit university. My parents were very, very Catholic, and I was raised with that mindset. So that sort of appealed. And I was a hardcore college basketball fan as a kid, fanatical. And Marquette had a run for a period of time where they were really strong.
Mhm.
So all those sort of ticked the boxes. And to be frank as well, I got in. I had, I think I mentioned I struggled with ADHD. I can see now my test scores weren't off the charts. And so, I got in. That was good enough for me.
That's awesome. What was your major at Marquette?
Marquette does. I was eventually chose business, but it was very liberal arts. So there was a
Mhm.
ton of history and religion and all the various liberal arts classes, but it was mainly business.
Did you enjoy the liberal arts part?
I did. I loved it. In fact, one of my favorite classes was philosophy. And I remember I spent a ton of time on a paper. Maybe this was my freshman or sophomore year. And I got back like a, I think 100 on it. I didn't get a lot of hundreds, but all the commentary was in German. And I thought, I didn't even know what the language was, right?
Great.
So I went and saw the professor, and he said, "Look, this is really good, but if you really want to go into this, you got to learn German." And I can see now he was fishing.
Mhm.
He saw something in me,
Mhm.
and I think he was like, "Okay, there's every once in a while you have somebody that takes this bait and dives in the philosophy." That
Mhm.
I was not there in my life then. I wanted to go out and party with friends. So I never. I finally started learning a little bit of German in the last few years after other languages. But I remember that. I remember that well.
That's cool. So at Marquette, what was your favorite thing about attending there?
Oh boy, the friends, the
Yeah.
friends. I made some great friends, and man, we had a lot of fun. There was a fair amount of hard work. Even though I wasn't in the engineering classes, I had a lot of engineering friends, and I took some of the engineering classes, differential equations and the like. So I made some good friends, and we worked pretty hard. And it's not my favorite thing to admit, but I will own we partied pretty hard, and just built some great relationships, really beautiful
Cool.
relationships.
So after Marquette, well, actually, let me ask you this. I happen to believe that one of the values, so to speak, that upper education, college, that type of thing brings or adds to your life is the network that you tap into. Because there are Marquette alums everywhere, right? Just like I'd have a conversation with my son, went to Nebraska. Son, there are Nebraska alums everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I'm currently in school at Oklahoma, full disclosure, Oklahoma University, right?
Yeah.
Not that I bleed Oklahoma red or anything, but I literally bleed Oklahoma red. And there are OU alums everywhere, worldwide, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? What did you
Absolutely.
find? What did you find in terms of the value that network brought you?
Look, I see it from Marquette. I see it even more so from Duke, where we talked about I went to grad school, and I see it from other people that went to different schools as well. It's powerful.
Yeah.
Now, Marquette is particularly strong in the Midwest. So had I stayed in the Midwest, including Chicago, I think that network would have served me a lot better.
Yeah.
And I definitely had a few of my friends that backed me in my first business, ZICO Coconut Water, and that were helpful along the way. But frankly, I'll get to this, but I spent a lot of my career overseas, my career in New York, a lot of my career in the West Coast, and that the Marquette network is good, but to be very frank, it's not great. And I do see the value of a localized network, as well as some of the more prominent schools. But what I know for certain is it's how you work it.
Yeah.
Networks
1000%.
only, right? And I can see it frankly took me a while to become comfortable with working and using my network. I had some guilt about that. And I see that with my daughter struggling with that, frankly, too. So no matter how good the network is, you gotta work it. No matter how weak you might think it is, if you work it right, it's limitless, because we're all 6 degrees of separation from everyone. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the connection that you feel being from the same school is powerful. It really is. And that's why, anyway, it's something that I wanted to ask you about, just because it's something that I'm seeing, and it's something that I've experienced. And I feel like it's not everybody is cut out to go to college.
Yeah.
And when I went to college, full disclosure, when I went to college, I wasn't ready to go to college.
Right.
I was ready to get into business. I was ready to go to work. I was ready to do all kinds of things. College wasn't one of them. Okay. And eventually I got to a place to where it worked for me. And I ended up doing what I did, going to night school, all that kind of thing. Everybody gets there in their own time, right? And you have to figure out, I think, what works best for you at what time in your life, and where you are in terms of your patience and your, I have ADHD, I'm sure too. I've never been diagnosed with any of it, but there are people around me that think I'm absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's possible, but anyway, so, right. Denial's not just a river running through Egypt. Okay. Right. So after Marquette, where do you go?
Yeah, well, one comment I wanted to make, Mike, that came up for me was I think you nailed something that's really powerful, and that is know thyself, right?
Yeah.
That this is, at the end of the day, this journey, lifelong journey, is about getting to know ourselves. It's the person you're going to spend the most time with. And to your point, a lot of us deny that that's the fact, but you get to know yourself, things get a lot more interesting and easier. And I think that was a process for me as well. During college, I had this vision of working in corporate America. I thought that's where the action is, that's where the money is, that's where the success is. Entrepreneurship seemed weird to me. I didn't get it. But so I had the fortune of actually getting a job at IBM during college, white shirt, blue suit, red tie days, right? Like I felt so important. I'm going to the office.
You were Mr. Buttoned Up.
Yeah, Mr. Buttoned Up, right? So not my background, and so not me, frankly. But it was a great experience. I learned a ton. But when I got near graduation, I started to realize this is not me.
Yeah.
This is not me. I interviewed for a lot of other jobs, and it wasn't like it was a challenging economy at the time. I wasn't exactly getting offers rolling in. And while I was at a job fair, I remember going by, in the Midwest, it was, maybe Harley Davidson or, IBM or whatever, other companies recruiting. And then there's a little table for the Peace Corps. And that was curious to me. I've heard about that international. I remember reading about that, and I remember asking someone there, "You don't happen to have business programs, do you?" And she said, "Absolutely. We have a small business development program. We're looking for people to join that come out of have some business education, and we'd love you to think about it." And the more I thought about that, I thought, man, I hadn't been out of the country. I'd barely been. The furthest south I'd been was North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
like that struck me as an adventure. And so back then you submit your application, and the more narrow you are, the less likely. So I said, I'll go anywhere in the world, anywhere in the world. And I get in the mail one day, big thick envelope that says, "Welcome, you're going to Costa Rica." Now,
Wow.
this is pre-zip line and Four Seasons, right?
Yeah.
But it's still not exactly digging latrines in the South Pacific. Like it's still, extraordinary country. So I joined the Peace Corps. So I was a small business development, volunteer, and for 2.5 years in Costa Rica.
That's awesome. So what was it about Costa Rica that shocked you the most when you got there?
The first was the heat. I remember, well, even before the heat, flying in, I remember seeing, first of all, how lush it was,
Mm-hmm.
but also how small the houses were,
Mm-hmm.
and tin roofs,
Mm-hmm.
these teeny little houses with these little tin roofs
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, and dirt roads. And I just thought, wow, I am not in Pittsburgh anymore. I am, yeah.
So you're there for 2 years. What was your favorite thing about your time with the Peace Corps?
Oh man, great question, Mike. Oh boy. I'd have to say, at the time, I would have said, I still would say this to this day. It was finding my purpose within the constraints of wherever I was,
Mhm.
because I had 3 months of training, lived with a local family. Then I moved to a little teeny little town, and I had a quote unquote job. I had one assignment with a local bank, a cooperative, that I'm supposed to support this loan program. I could have done that, 5 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so the general premise is be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Find a way to be relevant. And I'm not really an extrovert. I'm more of an introvert. So that was challenging for me. But I met people, and I started to figure out, where I could be helpful. So I wound up, in addition to doing some additional work with this cooperative on sort of helping mainly women-owned entrepreneurs, kind of get financing and figure out how to expand their businesses a little bit. But then I was also I was the town gym teacher. The school didn't have a gym teacher. So I did that. I'd take the kids out hiking and had a blast with them. I taught English to people, got involved in a few other community projects, and I wound up really building community and with some amazing people, and that felt great. I remember one of my brothers came down to visit. Everywhere we go, people knew me and I knew them. I'd be invited for lunch and dinner everywhere, and he's like, "You're mayor of this town. It's a teeny little town." But that was a great experience.
That's cool. So you're there 2.5 years?
Yeah, about 2.5 years.
How did you feel during that 2.5 years?
Oh boy, great, Mike. You're talking my language. I'll tell you some stories about bringing feelings into boardrooms, and that. But so we'll come back to that. I felt when I look back, I can see now because I became a master at burying and denying my emotions. But I can look back now and see I had a lot of fear of, am I relevant? What am I doing? Am I wasting my time? I also felt bored for a period of time, to be honest. What am I doing? What's this about? I even went into the first experience of my life of a mild depression
Wow.
of what am I doing with my life? What is this about? Why am I here? And when I look back, that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me because I
Mhm.
actually had time to think, to feel, to read, to write,
Mhm.
and started to begin to think about what kind of life do I want to have?
Mhm.
Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And I read some incredible books and I think started to ask myself some deeper questions.
Mhm.
And it's I wouldn't trade that for the world. Wouldn't
I
trade
can
that.
only imagine what that had to have been like moving from Marquette, right? Pittsburgh, Marquette, that kind of thing, to a third world nation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're plopping yourself in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And here you are with, I mean, I don't, were you fluent in Spanish?
No, no, that's another great thing.
Okay. So you're
Yeah,
sort of a fish out of water, right?
absolutely.
And then at this point, you sort of plop yourself in this situation, and then you have to figure out, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to figure out how to rely on yourself
Absolutely.
for kind of the first time in your life, right?
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, Mike, and yeah, one of the other things I learned, one of the key things I learned about myself is I am incredibly adaptable, resilient, and able to sort of find myself almost wherever I am. So, and I learn through absorption, not through typical methods. So, for example, when I was going away, a friend of mine joked that she said, because I'd taken maybe 2 years of high school Spanish, and she said, Mark, you slept through most of it. And I remember I was trying to practice with my sister in advance, and I couldn't remember the difference between cuando, when, and cuanto, how much. And she looked at me and she's like, "You're going to go live and work in a country and you don't know the difference between how much and when." So I knew close to nothing. Now I will give the Peace Corps credit, along with our other, military and other government organizations. They do an incredible job of language training. They know how to do it, and it's about immersion.
Mhm.
And I also know that I learned that. That's how I learned. So being there, fighting through it. Although I thought my head was going to explode
Yeah.
sometimes, I learned, and I became absolutely fluent. And I'll tell you some years later how I used that. But more importantly than learning Spanish, I learned how I learn.
Mhm.
I learned how I create resiliency. And I look back. Also, the other thing I learned is I love money, right?
Mhm.
Money's amazing, but it's not my joy, happiness, meaning in life will has never been and never will be contingent on money. I made 187 bucks a month. Now, Costa Rica was cheap back then, but still,
Not
that's
that cheap.
not that cheap. And I got by. My parents weren't sending me any money. I
Yeah.
got by.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How did your parents react when you told them
Ooh.
you were going?
They were very supportive. They were. And I remember that, I had entertained, yeah, at various points of my life, I entertained priesthood,
Mhm.
the military, and then the Peace Corps. And so I remember they were very supportive overall, although they were not travelers at all. And I think they just, trusted me and gave me the freedom to, choose my life. But I'll never forget on the day before I left, we had a party at my house, and my mom in a speech said, we of course support our military, but I am so glad my son's going on a mission of peace, not of war. And I thought that was important for me. That was important for me. I love and have so many friends. I'm so supportive, absolute believer in our military, and we need, and I want a strong military. And what about peace?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I totally understand where your mom's coming from too. I have two kids and I've spent my entire life protecting them.
Yeah.
And the idea of sending them into the military just, I couldn't respect the military more if I tried. My father-in-law is a war hero,
Wow. Okay.
literally war hero and legitimate. And, you know, it's just, yeah, it'd be tough.
Yeah.
So I would think it'd be tough to see your son leave and go to a place that's a third world nation, right? I mean, that even though it's Peace Corps, right? I would think that would, that would be something that would be hard to watch happen. I mean, obviously they were very supportive and that's awesome. Um, I just when I saw that part of your bio, I thought, I wonder, right? So after the Peace Corps, where do you go?
So, I think I still had this desire to work in business, but I had a little bit of conflict in me. And
Mhm.
I was also really fascinated in Costa Rica on what they had done to preserve the natural environment. They had a ton of fascinating work on species preservation. It's a beautiful country. And I can look back now and say the work they did then has led it to become one of the most desirable tourist destinations in the world. So I was involved in some early sustainability projects as well. So I was trying to figure out how to blend the two. And I had very limited resources. So I did decide that I want to go to grad school.
Mhm.
And I had so little money, though. I remember I had to choose one application. Couldn't do multiple.
Yeah.
So I
Because
was
there's a fee for the
yeah,
application,
yeah, right,
right?
right. Like I think it was like $50, which is like
Yeah. Like I
half a
can't,
month's salary,
yeah.
right?
Hello.
So I
It's kind of a
so
one-shot deal.
I was looking for a university that would combine business and environmental studies. There were very few at the time. And I was, in addition to Marquette, as a kid growing up, I was obsessed with Duke basketball.
Mhm.
And so Duke had a great program that combined both. Very rare, probably only about 3 or 4 schools in the country did. Although I thought I knew it was a long shot given my grades and background. I had good test scores, but not great grades. I wondered, could this Peace Corps thing be a story that they would latch on to? So they did. So I got in, and after backpacking around Central America for a couple months, went straight to Duke.
Awesome. So when you get to Duke, how do you feel?
Oh boy, insecure, excited, but fear underneath that for sure.
Imposter syndrome at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. God,
Yeah.
it's not even a syndrome when people are showing up with nice cars. They've worked
Mhm.
on Wall Street. They've had their successes, and I have, you know, I've got like a couple pairs of pants, a couple shirts. They're all like designed, I bought in Costa Rica, so they're like thin cotton. They've been washed a gajillion times, and I have a cheap bike that I bought and put a milk crate on the front of it as my to carry books to school.
Mhm.
So it was not imposter syndrome. It's like this guy doesn't like. I'm in a different world. I'm in a different world.
So I interviewed a gentleman who is a former Navy SEAL,
Mm,
and he was leaving being a SEAL, getting ready to retire, and he applied to one business school, Stanford.
mm, mm.
for an MBA. And he was accepted. He thought, no, if I get accepted, great. If I don't, it's okay. You're right. He was accepted. And he was telling me about the summers. So it's a couple of years to get your MBA, right? So when they would go on summer breaks, he was inventing a training strap company called TRX. You probably have heard of them, right?
Yeah.
So he was married, and his classmates were going on the summer, and they would go do an internship on Wall Street, make like $500,000 in the summer, right? And he would go downstairs into the basement of the house that they were renting in Palo Alto, and he would take an old used sewing machine and he'd make straps. Right. He goes, I'm pretty sure my wife asked herself a couple of times, what in the world? How did I come up so short on this deal? Right. Yeah. Like impostello, right? So anyway, I thought that was that sort of juxtaposition, it's crazy.
My now amicably ex-wife, I'll tell you a story about that in the early ZICO days. That the same thing. But I had a really interesting, so since I did this joint program, it was 3 years. So I had 2 summers in between. And man, I had the fantastic experiences. The first summer, I went to work for Coca-Cola in Atlanta in their corporate environmental affairs program, division group, which was like 3 people, and it was frankly rubber stamping. Like it was to be blunt, it was greenwashing. And so what was interesting is I worked for a brilliant guy, and I was actually really deep in researching leading thinkers, many of them very conservative, the Cato Institute and the like, on their views about these environmental issues. And it was fascinating, really, to really learn that perspective, because then I'm back at Duke, literally out in the forest, measuring the girth of trees to measure carbon dioxide uptake, where nobody has any biases. We're looking at the data, right? And so it was fascinating to get that juxtaposition. And then another summer, I wound up going to Mexico with Boise Cascade. I don't even remember how this one came about. They had built a state-of-the-art sawmill in a very rough part of Mexico, under the premise that they'd be able to get wood from up in the hills around this area, and they were not getting as much as they expected. So they sent me down to see if I could figure anything out. And sure enough, I didn't was able to solve the problem, but I could see what the problem was. They were dealing with these indigenous communities up in the hills that, in addition to extracting wood, they're growing poppy, they're growing marijuana. So that the competition for time and attention was not exactly even, but it was an incredible, odd but incredible experience to spend a summer bouncing around a pretty tough part of Mexico.
And that timber was cover.
And right, exactly.
Right.
Like,
hello. If you're harvesting the timber, you're taking away their cover. Their camouflage is leaving, right? Come on, baby. This is right. It's survival 101. So when you attending Duke, what was your favorite thing attending there?
Oh boy. I think I would say 2 things. In the School of the Environment, they called it. I had some incredible classes. I had this class called biogeochemistry, which is basically looking at the cycles, the physical cycles of our universe and planet. How does biology, chemistry, and geology fit together and feed off each other? It was incredible. I was a teacher's assistant for a class on watershed hydrology, which I've never done modeling so deep. I was helping to build, and I had a real knack for spreadsheets for some reason. I was helping to build these really complex models to measure the inflow of rain and into watershed, two mountains and a river in between. And then what the outflow would be based on the water and the soil and that then would feed into these climate models. So I loved that. And then interestingly, at the business school, without a doubt, it was the people. I met up to that point some of the smartest people I've ever met, and that also had some incredible experience, like you mentioned, on Wall Street, as investors. And so I just learned so much from them. I'll tell you one story. I was a little bit, I could get on my high horse, and somehow we were talking about CEO compensation and blah, 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 blah. And, I was arguing, look, it needs to be tied to results, and this, even then it's excessive, da, da, da. And I had a guy pull me aside one day and said, Mark, you do understand that's not really CEOs that make all the decisions? And I didn't really know about boards and institutional investors and this or that. So I'm like, no, I'm not buying it. Da, 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 da. And I think back now to realize he was being very polite, trying to help me see my ignorance. And I just wasn't willing to see it yet. But I learned so much that kind of began to open my eyes to the way the business world really works.
That's amazing. So after Duke, where do you go?
Yeah, so I do remember actively interviewing, doing a lot of the typical interviewing track. I didn't want to do something like investment banking, or probably couldn't have gotten attracted to that anyway. Consulting was interesting, but I was not top enough in the class to get those jobs or interviews. So I was looking at a number of different corporations and organizations. And but man, I was not getting the jobs again. And I remember in one interview, one recruiter, person from this company saying, wait a second, you left IBM to join the Peace Corps? Why would you do that? And he wasn't probing. He
was judging.
Absolutely. And you know what I said?
What in the world were you thinking, right?
Yeah. I remember I stood up and I said, if you don't get that, there's not really any point in us continuing this conversation. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I walked out of that scared and determined. Like, you know what? I'm done interviewing on somebody else's terms.
Yeah.
I'm done going to the regular interviews. Like, they're not going to want me and I don't want them.
Yeah.
And so I decided to go after my own job search. And I wound up deciding I want to work in a major corporation that is also tied in with natural resources or has environmental challenges. And at the time, Duke has a history in the forest industry. It used to be called the School of Forestry. And so they had some associations. And at the time, the largest private landholder in the US was International Paper. Mm-hmm. It's built as a conglomeration of all these other companies. And it turned out that I was able to get a connection there. A guy that ran Europe, his kids went to Duke. So I was on an exchange in Europe, reached out to this guy and met with him. And then he said, look, there's a little division called the beverage packaging division. They're probably they may be looking for one MBA a year to then work in the headquarters and then go live abroad and work abroad for a couple of years, mainly in Latin America. So I think they might be interested. So I met that group, and sure enough, they were hired one MBA. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think I might've been the only one even interviewing for it, because it's not like they promoted it. But I think what they saw is, MBA background, but I think they also, they respected the Peace Corps, because it's like, wait a second, this guy can live and work in those conditions. Mm-hmm. Like, we need people that, because what I learned later is expat assignments where one person's moved from another country, they fail quite often. And the main reason they fail is psychological reasons and romantic reasons. Like, the partner doesn't love it or can't function, or the individual can't adapt to the life and culture. And so they were able to theoretically eliminate that risk with me.
Yeah. Well, you proved yourself, right? You were in Costa Rica for 2.5 years. Okay. Yeah. Right. I mean, it sounds like a fit to me. So yeah. So that's awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. I moved to, by that time I'd met my soon to be wife, Maura, in grad school. She was at UNC Chapel Hill. So we moved to Memphis and I started working in this division. So we spent 2 years there where I really traveled the world. I was in Europe, Asia, Latin America, a ton doing business development work, learning all these different businesses. And then we got the chance to move to El Salvador.
That's cool. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about your book. Show us your book real quick. Pick it up for me. Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. I love it. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. And we're back with Mark Rampolla. We were talking before the break about you were in Memphis and you just had the opportunity to move to El Salvador. Tell us about that. So why would you be motivated to move to El Salvador, number one, right? And how did your wife feel about it?
Yeah, so fascinating, especially now that that country's so much in the news. Back then it was only bad news. It had just war. It was not a safe place at all.
It was rough.
And again, I think fortunately there was kind of a slate of one. There's probably only one person in that company of 100,000 that was like, knew this division, spoke Spanish, and was excited to move to El Salvador because I loved Latin America. And the thing I realized in business school was if I knew I wanted to run a business. I knew that. And part of that was my learning. One of the things I've spent a lot of time with leaders in across our portfolio is know yourself, understand your zone of genius versus others, right? Let people play in their zones of genius so you play in yours. When I was in business school, I can remember meeting people that were so amazing at finance, marketing, operations were the kind of main three functions. And I remember thinking, well, what do I do if I love them all, but I'm not the best at any of them? And I realized, oh, maybe that's the boss. So that was my goal, was to be a general manager and become sort of an operator. But I also knew that, from just kind of talking to people and looking how careers develop, to get a chance to do that in a major corporation in the US takes forever. Mm-hmm. You could be president of a $5 billion division and still not deal with cash flow, legal, all these other things. But if you're overseas, you deal with everything. So my goal was to get overseas. So that the chance to run a business as true general manager, P&L responsibility was intriguing. And I loved Latin America, right? So I was excited about that. My then wife, Maura, was equally. She had done some volunteer work in Guatemala. She backpacked across Central America and Mexico. So she was super excited about this as well. Not to mention, like a couple years earlier, I'm making $187 a month. Now it's gonna be a six-figure, salary plus housing plus everything. We're looking at each other like, is this really happening?
Mm-hmm. So you're in El Salvador, where a six-figure salary goes what, 4 times as far?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're in El Salvador for how long?
5 years.
What was the single most important thing you learned in that 5 years there?
Oh boy. This is my life. Mm-hmm. Got one life and I'm going to live it as mine, because until then I was sort of following what the corporation wanted. Nothing wrong with that. Where they wanted to put me, what that development would be. And I did a good work. And so I was on a path to become a corporate executive there for sure. And I realized, fortunately, those are golden handcuffs. Mm-hmm. That's not my path. It's not my path.
Well, if you look at where it is you're headed, and that's not where you want to be, right? It's time to pivot, right? So after 5 years at El Salvador, where do you go?
So that's when I got to a place where I realized I didn't want to stay with International Paper. Loved them, they served me well, but that was not my future. So I started thinking about what kind of job I'd get. And again, I got into a place of fear like, ah, the job I'm trained to do is going to be to run some division for a US multinational in Latin America. That means I'm living in Miami, traveling 100 days a year. Like,
Yeah.
do I really want to do that? Our girls had just been born, they were young. And so I almost came to entrepreneurship as a default, like, you know what? Shoot, I think I might have to start a business to get the life I want. And so I started brainstorming ideas, and that's when I came up with coconut water. So I quit my job at International Paper. I'd raised some money from some local investors and some friends and family, including some Marquette friends, and moved to New York to launch ZICO.
Okay, hold on just a second. How did you come up with coconut water?
Yeah. Oh boy. I can give you my story, but then I forget there's a term for it when the zeitgeist is sort of ready for an idea. Like I will own that health and wellness was trending, Latin America was trending, a lot of things trending. But mainly what happened was I was a supplier to the beverage industry. So I sold packaging and equipment and production lines
With
for
International Paper.
yeah,
Yeah,
for International Paper for juice and dairy companies. So
right.
I was reading the beverage magazines. And I remember probably around 2004 seeing vitamin water taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And boy, did it ever. It took off like a rocket. Yeah.
right? So beverages themselves were on a list. And I started to develop just a long list of potential ideas. Chocolate, I love chocolate, but also integrating and rolling up the dairy industry of Central America, even though I didn't really know what that meant back then. But these were random ideas until I started to put them through criteria. So I developed a series of criteria. So big market, good margin potential, good growth potential. But does it fit with my life?
Yeah.
Is something I can get excited about? Is it going to make a positive impact in the world? What will my girls think about this in 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
And so somewhere along the line, when I was thinking about beverages, health and wellness, and impact, coconut water hit the list, as did pineapple juice and everything else in Central America, because it was on my mind. But what was interesting about coconut water is, first of all, it's super healthy, all the electrolytes of a Gatorade, but including more potassium than a banana, but lower in sugar and calories than any sports drink. I can still rattle that off today that I rattled for 9 years. And grown in, I forget what the number is, 50 some countries around the world, massive global commodity, but mainly that coconuts are grown for the meat and oil and cream, and the water's literally thrown away.
Yeah.
So the potential to take a waste product and realizing that, wait a second, as successful as vitamin water is taken off, it's not really that clean. It's not really that healthy. What if we could position this as a better Gatorade, as a healthy sports drink? And that was, something one of the criteria for me was, can I be devoted to this? Can I devote myself this for a decade or more? And that I knew I could. I'd been an athlete, right? I'd gone in the natural foods myself. So I had my own journey that made sense for that as well.
How'd you come up with the name ZICO?
Yeah. So one of the people I tapped for this is my sister is a architect, and she's just a brilliant mind. And so I brought her involved in this process. And one of the things I had her do is, or we kind of came to together, was I realized I wanted the name to be short, memorable, and non-offensive in the major 9 world languages. So she developed a spreadsheet with every possible word combination from 2 to 5 letters. Mm-hmm. And we just started circling which ones made sense, just in a spoken word or in a written way. then put them through the various processes. What do they mean in other languages? And can we trademark them?
Mhm.
And ZICO sort of stuck. It just kept sticking. Short, co in it for coconut doesn't mean anything. We could bring the meaning, make the meaning we wanted to around it, and it just stuck. And somewhere along the way, I got a ping from a buddy that knew what I was doing that said, "You're not going to believe this. I just saw ZICO.com is for sale for like $500." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a sign." So we bought that and we were off to the races.
That's awesome. So you go to New York, you start ZICO.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you raised money from friends, family, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a second? Because raising money is something that a lot of people are interested in, and they don't necessarily get a lot of the details in these
Yeah.
stories. Can you talk about that for a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, I'll tell you what happened then, but I'll just contextualize this. I have been raising money nonstop since that very first raise. Even after selling ZICO, starting funds, I've raised $1 billion, including our own funds, and it never gets easy. Never. It's easier, or I realize what happens, but the same process I used then, I use now, and I use always. The first thing was get really, really clear on what my intention is. What am I building? Have a big vision that I get excited about and I can get people excited about it. Very clear plan, as clear as you can, not overpromise, right? And then, build, use the network, work your network, right? So I spoke to hundreds of people over the years, but early on, I had the very good fortune of the businesses I ran in Latin America were all joint ventures. So International Paper owned anywhere from 51 to 80% of 7 businesses that I ran. And a couple of the core businesses, I did really well. I made those families money on their businesses on a regular basis. And they put me on their board of directors as well. So I got to know them quite well. And they actually approached me even before I approached them. They told me, I remember at a party, a couple of them gathered around and said, "Look, we know you're going to leave International Paper and start your own thing someday. Whatever it is, we want to back you."
Wow, that's cool.
Amazing, amazing. Now, I can also see how they, I know this as well. There's a time and place where you preempt because you see talent. And if they could help them, frankly, negotiate a better deal in many ways. But I have no regrets on that at all. Were incredibly supportive. And then I had a lot of family and friends that supported, and my family didn't have any money. These were all 50, 100K checks, but just little by little by little by little. Some of them 25. And I raised $1 million, and I thought we were set. I thought that we'll never need any more than that. Oh my God, that's amazing. We blew through that in 6 months. And we're almost bankrupt. We spent the next 5 years constantly on the constantly growing, constantly on the verge of bankruptcy, and constantly raising money. Constantly raising money.
So here's the $64,000 question. How much should you have raised?
Yeah. Ooh, not a penny more or less, Mike. Not a penny more or less, because it all happened exactly and precisely as it was meant to. Now, and I really mean that.
Why do you say that?
Well, because that's just my view of life.
Okay.
Now, I could choose one of the catchphrases I use. We were talking about questions before. One of the catchphrases I use myself, I use with our founders and leaders, I write about in my book. How could this be happening for you, not to you?
Yeah.
How could that situation, whatever it is, be exactly and precisely designed for you for your maximum learning? Had I raised more money, we might have over invested and overspent too early, and it might have failed. Had I raised less money, I might have never taken the leap because I sort of had in mind that was what we needed. So now today is a very different day. Now some of this is extreme to send a message, because part of my job, I believe, is I don't deal with a lot of early stage founders. We certainly don't invest in them right now. We invest at a much later stage. But when I am talking to people, I'll usually, have some fun and ask them something like, look, are you willing to dedicate a decade of your life to this new business, knowing that your probability of making any money is probably less than 10%? And I usually get this response like, I don't know. The people that have a shot are the ones that say, I don't care. I don't
Let's
care.
go. Yeah.
I got to do this. I got to
Yeah.
do this. And I'm going to beat the odds, but it doesn't even matter. Like they have a shot. They have a shot. But what I tell people that I sometimes run into A-list celebrities or their teams that say, well, we want to launch a beverage, right? Or we want to launch this healthy product. And my response is typically, particularly if it's a beverage, so do you have $50 million to invest? Like, well, what do you mean? We got his name or her name. We don't. Okay, that's irrelevant. 50 million. That's what it takes to launch a beverage today and have a real shot at winning. Now there are always exceptions, right? There are people that figure it out and are scrappy for sure, but I don't see many of them. I don't see many of them.
Can we back up for a second?
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep doing this, but
Love it.
I'm legitimately curious. So you are, I feel like, a master at questions. And one of the things that I absolutely love the most that you've said this entire interview is the conversation that you're having with yourself about how can this work for me? How can this be something that's working for my destiny or for my plan, right? What fascinates me is this question of, are you willing to dedicate the next 10 years of your life knowing that you have less than a 10% chance, right?
Yeah.
That's really revelatory and qualifying in terms of what you get back, right? Because I'll bet you dollars to donuts, 90% of the people you talk to, and by the way, I don't eat donuts anymore, but dollars to donuts, right?
Yeah.
I'll bet you dollars to donuts that 90% plus of the people you ask that question to go, right? And then whether you've got a candidate or not. You'll have a very small percentage. I don't know, you tell me what the percentage is, but you'll have a very small percentage that'll go, I don't care, I got to go do this, right? I don't care if I fail, I got to go do this. Here's the thing. You're either going to learn or you're going to, right? I mean, you're going to learn or you're going to succeed. One of the two.
Yeah.
And you fall flat on your face, you're going to learn more falling. I mean, Tony Robbins likes to say that, when we win, we tend to ponder. When we lose, when we win, we tend to party. When we lose, we tend to ponder, right? And I always told my son, he was a high school MVP basketball player, and he lost a lot of games, and it just tore his heart out. But I told him, I said, listen, I understand how disappointed you are. Here's the deal. You're going to learn more from losing games than you ever will from winning, ever. Yeah. And you are all about getting better. This is part of the process of getting better. So
well said, Mike. Well said. I live by that now. And I'll tell you personally, for me, what's been interesting is, I had success at ZICO, and we'll talk about that. I accomplished the near impossible and built and sold the business up to, of all people, of Coca-Cola, right? For a ton of money. And I was set. And what I can look back now is see how I did party. I did. And I didn't ponder very much. And I sort of thought, and I had other people tell me I had the Midas touch. And so I became a super active angel investor, ridiculously slow. So, and I made a lot of mistakes, a lot. I lost a ton of money, millions myself, millions. And I also brought a lot of people into investments that followed me, trusted me, and lost millions. That is humbling. And through that process, as well as a lot of other things fell apart in my life. My health started to go to hell. My marriage fell apart. So in many ways, that quote is applicable for me. I started to ponder. And I started to wonder, and one of the things I think I learned, and I help entrepreneurs think about as well, is entrepreneurs tend to, if we ponder, we do it critically. God damn it, why did I do this? Why did that happen? I tried that for a long time. Didn't really work well. What's working way better for me is love and curiosity. Isn't it interesting? What was Mark thinking then? Not in a critical way, like, what were you thinking? Try to actually put myself back then. Yeah, I can see that. This was my fantasy. This was my dream. This is what I was ignoring or denying. I do that. I'm human. And so the fortunate thing for me is two things. One is I'm staying in the business game. My goal is to be active in business and an investor until they take me off the field. So 30 plus years from now. So I've got time to still learn from all these lessons. But more importantly, I'm alive. And so I think one of the things that you mentioned, brought up for me is, look, I'll say it this way. I think some people forget, you mentioned your son in sports. It's easy to forget that's a game. It's a great game, whatever the game is. You play the game, you get off the court, you're a human. Not just a human. I happen to believe we're divine beings that are having a human experience, right? Same thing in business. This is my game. I play the game of investing in better for you health and wellness brands, helping them scale and win. And you know what? I love the game and I want to win. But also I'm human. So are the entrepreneurs, so are the other players. And I sometimes help people remember, guys, this is a game. This is a game. And when we can take it as fun, look at Michael Jordan, right? Look at Tom Brady later in his career, right? They're having fun. They're working twice as hard, twice as smart, because they're having fun, right? So that's what I'm about now, is helping people relax, have fun, get to know yourself, find your position, play your role, ask some tough questions, and get off the field and have a life, right? And know that you're a spiritual being, like appreciate just being alive and being in the game.
Absolutely. So, couple of things. I know we're going to talk about this, but in your story, you sell ZICO to Coca-Cola, right? Where you interned all those years prior. How flippin' cool was that?
Oh my God.
Right? And then you come back and you buy ZICO back. That former Navy SEAL that I was telling you about, his name's Randy Hetrick, the one that invented TRX straps. Randy ended up buying TRX back. So he sold it to a private equity firm and then bought it back, right?
Wow.
And he literally said to me on our interview, he said, I wouldn't recommend this. Because he was with us to promote a new startup that he had.
Wow.
Right. And he's like, don't do this. Don't go start a company, right? And buy your old company back. I don't recommend it, So it's kind of one of those full circle things. So you move to New York, you blow through $1 million in 6 months, you figure out a way, right?
Yeah.
That had to have been difficult, but it also had to have been something that you generated a lot of wisdom from.
Yeah.
You build up ZICO Water over a 9-year period, and then you sell it to Coca-Cola. Was the original goal when you started to sell it to Coca-Cola, or was that something that just kind of happened?
Believe it or not, my first kind of vision board, business plan, goal was absolutely to sell to Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And for better or worse, my view was, look, I don't want to run it forever. I want to see this thing scale globally. Who better to do that than Coca-Cola? Yeah. Let them go figure out how to make billions selling something healthy. That was the goal.
How did that feel?
Oh, amazing.
Did they approach you or did you approach them?
Well, they approached me, but I had designed it that way. And I'll tell you this story. I remember one of the first senior connections I had at Coke. They had just spent $4.2 billion buying vitamin water. And I think they had made an internal decision. They don't want to miss out on early trends. So they formed a new group called Ventures and Emerging Brands. And I met a guy that worked in that division. And he said, Mark, you're not going to believe this. we did a nationwide research of trends, not just beverage, music, fashion, all sorts of trends. And ZICO showed up. Can you believe that? Like in the brand, we were teeny back then, teeny, definitely under 10 million in revenue. And I said, yeah, I can believe that. He said, well, what do you mean? How would you believe it? I said, let me guess. You focused on a couple major markets, New York, LA, Miami, maybe Chicago. He said, yeah. And I said, you focus on younger generation, whatever the time period would have been, people in their late 20s, early 30s. Yep. You focused on health and wellness, kind of factors. So you probably look for consumers that shop at Whole Foods. Maybe they run or bike ride or do yoga. Yep. And I said, you just validated my hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
My hypothesis was that's the consumers we need to build with to influence the future. And so you're seeing the same thing we are. So I'm not surprised at all, And that was the truth. We were building, we had the right hypothesis. We built it in the right way. And it doesn't always work this way, but it's one of these, in this situation, it was, if you build it right, they will come. They will come, and they came.
They found your target.
Yeah.
So they were researching your target market, right? And you were all over that target market because that was the key to your success.
Yeah. It wasn't that hard to, I think I do have a good ability to put myself in somebody else's situation. Sometimes that's challenging because I can be overly empathetic and compassionate, right? But where it's helpful is I know I could have had a job in Coke doing this research, right? So how would I have concluded that? I do the same thing now with, I haven't been one, but I understand what the role would be and how an investment banking associate would approach something. So we're building our companies in a way that's designed to meet what they're going to look for, right? Mm-hmm. As well as building great businesses. But I think that's the insight I had with Coke.
Yeah. Okay. So you sell your company to Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. Had to have felt amazing. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you sell the company to Coca-Cola and you go off and you start your investment company, right? Yeah. So you're basically an angel investor, like you said, VC type thing, right? And you're going great guns doing your thing. And at some point you have an opportunity to buy ZICO back. Can you talk about that for a second? Like, did Coca-Cola call you and go, hey, can you jump in here?
No. But I called them this time. So this would have been post-COVID. A lot of strategics were focusing on their core.
Yeah.
And eliminating anything that was non-strategic, non-core. For Coke, that meant they decided to sell off or shut down 200 brands globally. ZICO was just one of them that was going out with a wash. So anything under $1 billion was on the potential chopping block, and ZICO was there. And so as soon as we heard that news, I talked to my business partner, Dan, and I knew this wasn't just a personal decision. This was a business decision at the time we were investing out of our second fund. So it had to make sense for the investment strategy. I believed it would. He believed it would. So I called up. I still knew the head of M&A, and I called her up, and she said, "Oh, Mark, look, I just got the news. I have no idea how we're going to work through this." I don't think she didn't know I was doing this fund, this investment firm. So she said, "Look, if we're going to give it away to somebody, it's going to be you, but we probably have to run a process." And I said, "Marie, you don't have to give anything away. I have an investment firm now. We're serious. We would like to buy it." Yeah. Then we went through a process. Now, of course, I had information that a few other people had and knew how to get the information we needed. So it wasn't really a fair advantage, fair negotiation versus the others. But it also, I knew it was going to be a rounding error for Coke once they made that decision. So we bought it, but we bought only the brand, not the whole business. And that when I sold the business, ZICO was 25% market share. Our major competitor was a little bit bigger. Over the subsequent 7 years, the category had exploded, and the competitor now owned 50% market share, and ZICO had fallen to about 10% market share. But by the time we bought the business, bought the brand, started the takeover business, it hit 0 market share. zero. So we had to build back from nothing.
Yeah.
But not right now. But sorry to just to talk about the process. We just concluded that there was a massive opportunity, and unlike the person from RX you mentioned, TRX, I wasn't going to run it.
Yeah.
I knew I'm going to bring in a world-class team to run it day one. I'm going to be an active board member, like I am with any portfolio company I serve on, and they're going to run the play. And that's worked out very well.
That's awesome. What a cool story. Okay. So you decide to write a book.
Yeah.
Hold the phone. There's a lot of people that are listening to this that are thinking about writing a book. I'm currently, full disclosure, I'm working on one right now.
Great.
On the power of questions. Can you talk a little bit about what went into that? Like, what made you decide to do this? Because there are literally people listening to this, I promise you, that are sort of thinking about doing it. They just haven't taken the leap. They're, right? Talk about that for a second.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, this is my second book. I wrote a book right after ZICO called High Hanging Fruit. So I had some experience with it. But I will tell you, one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got is, and I'll share this with you, Mike, there's only one thing you need to do to be a writer. Write.
Start writing. Yeah.
Just write.
Yeah.
Just write. So I think I have for years, I've journaled for years. I work out my stuff writing. I just do. So I've always taken notes. I've always sort of written little things here and there, very different than writing a book. But like a lot of things in my life, when I try to get very clear on my intention, very clear on what I'm not doing and where I'm focusing my time. And in this time of my life, I was well on to GroundForce Capital and building that firm, but I was just out of a lot of my life falling apart. I was still living with decisions I'd made as an angel investor that were now coming to roost. And 5 years in, I was realizing, I'm not the genius I thought I was. My marriage that was very good and strong for many years started to fall apart, and we amicably decided that we were going to end that. That was not what I expected. My health I had health issues that were my self-inflicted. I was drinking a lot. I was not taking care of myself. I sort of woke up one day and thought, this is not what success was supposed to look like. And I don't feel free. I don't feel free. I'm stuck on phone calls and emails, and I'm angry and upset and So I'm running, like racing to the next goal and another fund and another deal and another exit, another million and so I finally started to just take a step back and say, okay, I gotta rethink everything. Like whatever I've done isn't working right now in the past. And that started a process for me that was a 7-year process of going really deep into my own, and then in general, psychology, neuroscience, coaching, therapy, all sorts of sessions, tons of reading, meeting with numerous, leaders in business and spirituality and other fields. And as I was working through that, I'm a planner. So I would write down and organize my thoughts. And I could finally realize I'm trying to hack this. I'm trying to build effectively like Mark's guide to, a meaningful life. And along the way, I started to apply a lot of these tools and techniques I was learning. I'll test and learn and see, how does this work? How does this work in business? How does it work in personal life? And I started to notice I felt better. I just felt a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more energized, a little bit better able to handle a situation. And it started to occur to me, I want to codify this for me. So this started out for me. And then as I was working on this, my business partner started getting curious, like he noticed a shift in me. So we started doing some coaching together. We started doing with the rest of our team, and I saw how people responded. And I thought, man, I have helped. I am so appreciative of so many people that took the risk, wrote the book, started the course, led the session, taught. I'm going to see what I can offer. And if it serves anybody else, amazing. But at a minimum, it'll serve me. It'll serve me.
So this was cathartic.
Yeah, it was pure catharsis. You nailed it, Mike. You nailed it.
So talk about the book itself. So it's the Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom.
Yeah.
A lot of entrepreneurs spend their entire lives working in their business.
Yeah.
And it's like a job. It's like a job with all these other responsibilities and all these other, it's like a job on steroids, right?
Yeah.
And they work and they work and they work and they work and they work. And then they get to a place in their life where they can't work anymore. And their businesses fall apart, like their business folds, and because they are their business. And by the way, true, full disclosure, I did this for 18 years. I owned a real estate company that I made myself the center of the entire thing. I had convinced myself that I was the only person that could do it. I could do it better than everybody else. I write all this stuff. I made it completely about me. And then I got sick. And I tried to sell it. And what I found was, be careful what you wish for, right? Be careful what you build, because every single person that wanted to buy the company wanted me to stay on for a period of anywhere from 5 to 10 years. They were not willing to buy this company without me being there. And I wasn't willing to be there because I needed to be away, right? I, health-wise, needed to make a disconnect. And so your book it literally gets to me in terms of, I've lived this. I know what this is about. And today I have a lot of confidence. I have a huge ego and all that kind of stuff, right? I was voted biggest ego in high school, right? Yeah. Right. But I'm also pretty humble too. And I'm somebody that is a realist, and I understand that I don't necessarily have all the skills that it takes to do all the things that I need done. And so I hire people to help me do it, that kind of thing. Owning a business is something that doesn't come with a rule book. It doesn't come with, do this and this will happen. It just doesn't work that way, right? That's why I love the fact that you wrote this book. Can you talk about who this book is for? Like, if somebody owns a business and they feel like you felt before, where you feel trapped, you feel like you're not free, you're literally just inundated every single day, that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, happy to. And thank you for sharing that, Mike. I didn't know that. And God, I have a lot of compassion and empathy for that. And I'm sure after all the work you've done and everyone you've talked to, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what I realize is, as I started to share more and more of my own story, I'll share one little anecdote. I remember sharing this with a number of entrepreneurs. I remember early in ZICO's era, very early on, I was so afraid. I can look back now, so afraid, so anxious. Couldn't really talk with my wife about a lot of things. Felt like I had to do it all alone. Exactly like you're saying. I'm alone. I got to do this. It's about me. Da, da, da. I rationally concluded I don't need my emotions. I don't need them. They're holding me back. They're a pain in the ass. They're below me. They're below me. So I remember intentionally thinking, cut, 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 cut. Just disconnect them.
Shove them under the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did it like consciously. And you know what? I showed up. I was a good father. I was a good person. I'd still think most people would say I was one of the more, sort of present and aware. I remember reading the book Emotional Intelligence, and I absorbed it, and because it's about other people. You have emotions. I don't. I know this is about me. This is about you. And so that worked for me for about 7 years. It did. And so I don't have any shame or blame, and I can love and see why I did that. But when I've shared that story and many, many, many others, the response I get from a lot of entrepreneurs is, me too. Me too. I didn't know that happened to anybody else because, God, we don't share. We perceive ourselves to be this, we're like swans across the water on the surface, beautiful and smooth, and underneath it's like, da, 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 da.
Mhm.
And you can't talk about it with an investor because, God, they don't want to know that. Can't talk about it with your people underneath you. Sometimes not even your spouse or significant other. So it is lonely. It's lonely. So part of my goal was to write this book for entrepreneurs at any of these stages. And it's really not written for the 22-year-old that's just starting out, to be frank. Somebody wants to read it, great. I've shared it with some people, it's a little bit over their heads, right?
Mhm.
But if somebody's in the grind, they've hit walls, right? They've learned some painful lessons, that they stuck on growth, personally or business wise, in transition. What do I do? Where do I go? And the people that are quote unquote successful. I've met so many people, tens, hundreds of millions, billionaires, free. They're trapped by the stuff they haven't worked out earlier in their lives. More this, get that, must be done this way. So my hope is to provide just a little bit of compassion, a little bit of acknowledgement. So I share a lot of personal stories. And the hope is to just give anybody on that journey, wherever they are, a little bit of support and some tools.
Mhm.
Because one of the things I concluded as well is it's sort of a simple phrase, three things you need to be successful: mindset, tool set, and skill set, right?
Mhm.
The skills and tools are usually specific to your business. But people talk about mindset if it's just like, just have it. Well,
Mhm.
how? How? I hacked my how. So this is my how to shift your mindset, to develop the tools and the skills that give you the mindset that allow you to go as far as you're meant to go,
Mhm.
and to be self-aware enough to say, like you did, you know what? No, I got to take a break. Can you feel free to do that? Can you allow for the possibility maybe there's something even more amazing by saying no,
Mhm.
by stopping, by pausing, by changing? So that's what I'm up to now. Is like I feel like it's not easy, but there's a million places to learn, the skills and the tools to run a business. You're right. There's no perfect playbook, but there's, man, a lot out there. I just felt like there wasn't a lot that gives an entrepreneurs like real specific tools and skills to meet them where they are.
So there's millions and millions of small businesses out there that we're so like right now, we're in the midst of the single greatest transfer of wealth in our nation's history. There are millions of boomers out there who own businesses that they've owned for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they have no idea what to do with them. Their kids don't want to have anything to do with it. The kids don't want the business, right? Is this a book that somebody like that could benefit from?
Oh boy, Mike, that is an amazing point. That is one audience I hadn't really thought of. And you mean the owner, the sort of absolutely. Because what I've found is that, there's various points in life
Mhm.
where one is predisposed to rethinking everything, right? Let's say 20s, right after college, or depending on where you are. Around 30, it's kind of a good transition point. Around 50 or so at retirement, or let's say 50 or so. And then you've got this later stage where absolutely 70s and 80s. I have a lot of friends and I talk with a lot of people at that age, and those that are willing to, if you really hear, and they'll be willing to share. It's scary as hell.
Mhm.
Scary as hell. And imagine you've built this business, you played it out well. God, do I push it on to my kids? Do I sell it? Do I continue on? And then what? Right? We know the statistics about men that dedicate their lives to a business and then leave aren't good actually for lifespan. They're not, right? How do you stay relevant? How do you I don't have the answers to that, but I have the questions and I have a process for helping people ask those tough questions with love and compassion. God, you know what? I thought this. One of the little tricks I use is, what's the story you're telling yourself? We're all telling ourselves a story, right? This is good. That's bad. Kids must take over business, must be successful. Okay, great. Write it down. Are you certain? Are you absolutely certain that's true? And if anybody's half aware, they can't, very few, little in this life we can be 100% certain about, right?
Right.
And then the deeper question is, what if the opposite were true? What if the best thing is to not pass on the business to your kids? What if the best thing is to allow them to fail, right? Can you at least allow that possibility? And then can you test and learn? You take little tests. I'm fascinated by how entrepreneurs are so focused on, test and learn and best ideas out there and around them, but they don't do them themselves, right? Like how many people, I have this exercise I talk about with people on an energy audit of your calendar. What's energy up? What's down? Can you kill one down and add one up a week? It's like people they can build these incredible businesses, but they're afraid to skip a meeting, right? Because they feel like they have to be there. No problem. We all do that. Can you see the story you're telling yourself?
Well, that's part of the trap, right? Having those meetings that you feel like you cannot miss.
Exactly.
Having that, right, that place you have to be, that you feel like if you're not there, you're failing yourself and you're failing your company and you're right. I mean, that stuff weighs. It's heavy, really, really
so
heavy.
Heavy if you allow it to be. And this is where, Mike, I wanted to offer some tools because I felt that. I mean, the burdens I was carrying for years. And look, right now, we have $600 million under management. We work with some of the most sophisticated, demanding institutional investors in the world. I serve on boards of directors of companies that are, man, it's tough, right? They're fighting every day to survive and grow, and tariffs and I feel light and free. And it's because of the work I do that actually allows me to show up. So when I come into a board meeting and come into a meeting that I want to be at, and I show up in full, on time, and present, that's where the action is. You can't do anything about the past. You can't do anything about the future, only at this moment. But there are some tricks, little hacks, like these little questions that allow one to say, oh, yeah. I can see I have that belief. I can see it's a hypothesis. If I show up, because otherwise it's just like you're dealing with noise. But when you actually write it down and say, yeah, I see that. I think I'm better off in that mean that we're going to get better results. And I can see that, oh shoot, I can actually see the feeling underneath that is, if I'm not there, am I relevant? Right? Okay, test and learn. Skip one meeting and learn. What happens? Maybe the business falls apart. Okay, I need to be there. Maybe you get even better results. Maybe somebody else steps up. When I get really deep into this work, I've had CEOs, big companies, growing companies, tell me, Mark, I have so much time. I'm not sure what to do. Am I still even relevant in my business? And I say, congratulations. Who knows? Ask yourself that question, but don't just fill in the time, right? Can you use that time to think, to reflect, to work on yourself? Jeff Bezos talks about a meeting a day, right? Works out, trains, whatever his routine is, to be able to show up for that one meeting. How powerful would that be?
Yeah, no kidding. That's amazing. Show us the book again. It's The Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. Love it. Absolutely love it. And we're going to have you back so that we can go over the book chapter by chapter. So people
Mike,
can look forward to that. That's an upcoming episode.
This is absolutely in the top of all the podcasts I've ever done. Like your depth of questions and your approach, it's an energy up for me. So I'll be honored.
Thank you, bud. Thank you. That really means a lot to me. And I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been amazing. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.